class I went to university, and I was looking around going.
Yeah, it's going well.
I came in there and
One of them was trying to Lex Morris. Yeah.
Did you work out any?
Yeah, I went to the west.
I hate
You know, everybody in there.
No, I think it's in one school. I had to, did have to do one vaccine. Everything was just, yeah.
I remember going to Fred after three, so you could only go in the girls' dorms in the lobby, and you had to be out of the lobby by the time. You had to be out of the lobby by 11.
That's a review.
You had to be out of the lobby by 10.
Hopefully Chris knows.
But you had to be in the dorm by 11. Except for on Friday and Saturday, college
See how your parents are now?
My mom, she just has been kind of not feeling great. Kind of maybe feels like she might have like a sinus infection or just kind of feeling run down. So she's staying. I don't know. My mom may be here in the downstairs class. I don't know.
Yes. It's the time of the year when things change.
Sinuses. Y'all doing okay?
Better now. Stomach virus, but
Like girls in the lobby.
we brought it from school.
You didn't get it at all.
No, just luckily just
That's the one thing I dread. The one thing I dread.
yeah. It's just okay. Nothing you can do.
Hopefully he's the only one that got it.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. I mean, usually by now, one of us would be on
Versus the
first step.
Pretty much. I got a couple other schools.
They're fantastic.
Sometimes like 14 or
Page 10.
That's a great
But
if you start going to sleep,
Yeah.
Wow.
I would never do something like that.
How we doing?
Waiting on you?
I know, right? Mercy. Run for one till next.
you're a little overdressed tonight.
Yeah, I am.
You probably hadn't had a chance to change.
No, I haven't.
That's that funeral suit, man. He hadn't gone home yet today.
Did you put the engine in your check?
Did you make it home from work?
It's far away.
No, I'm saying.
You hear anything? You wanna step outside and tell me, or we?
He was telling us all that.
He's gonna make you wait.
We'll get it on video.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. Oh, your mom was in the other class, I guess, is just teaching. Yeah. She's heard enough of me lately.
Carol's down there too. She's in the first secondary class. Get ready for Sunday.
I left my glasses down in the
Start
car.
playing first, teaching stuff.
Reading glasses or regular glasses?
Just reading glasses.
You want them?
I may need them.
You want them?
I may be.
I got extra pair in the car.
It's okay.
See if it'll work.
I may need them.
I usually keep a couple pairs for him. Still looking for
We're,
them. One of them's on your head. And the other's- I'm sorry, I didn't in my pocket.
All right, let's get started. Mr. Eskew, would you mind leading us in a word of prayer, please?
Absolutely. Father, we thank you so much for this day that you've blessed us with, Lord. Thank you for this time together with our brothers and sisters, and thank you for this time that you give us each week where we can be there for one another, encourage one another, lift each other up. So thankful for the spiritual family that you've given us, God. And things in our life aren't going so great, we can have each other and look to the more important things, Lord, focus on you. Thank you for Chris and his preparation for tonight's class. pray that you be with him, be with us, and be attentive, and learn something as we conclude this class together. Help us to take it with us and apply it in our lives. Help us to be lights in this world throughout the rest of this week and look for opportunities to do your will. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Jake. Tell you, it's been, I think it's my first time to teach with Jake, and it's been good. So, not to go into some big sob story, but
Please don't.
no, it's been good, and it was interesting to watch Jake, and be interesting to see them when they leave, and hopefully come straight back in another 2.5 years, and watch the growth when he comes back. So there's something about, and you probably think I'm weird by saying this, but there's really a growth when you leave the shadows of your parents and your in-laws, that you kind of get to spread your wings a little bit, and you get to teach your own classes, and you're Jake and Erica, you know, and not Eric's son and Andy's son-in-law. So, which is not a bad thing. I'm just saying that there is a growth there. It'll be fun to see y'all come back. Hopefully you'll come back sooner than later.
Right.
So, okay, I had prepared some things for tonight's review, but there's so much information in this book. Does everybody have a book? Do you even have one near you? Okay. Let me ask, I asked y'all when we first started this class, and y'all may not remember, and it's like with any class, what did you hope to learn out of this class? And I also asked, what particular lesson were you potentially looking forward to studying? And those of you who were just making up answers won't remember anything that you said 13 weeks ago or 12 weeks ago, whenever we did this. But, and I'll give you a chance to kind of look through and skim some things. There's so much information in here. There is no wrong answer, because it's really up to you, whatever you want to say. To me, I'm always I was never really a really big book, word study kind of guy. I like a bigger picture. I like the application part of everything. To me, you know, you go through a lot of classes and you see people not apply what you've learned, which means you've learned nothing to me. But if you can apply it, then you've learned something, you know. So that's how I learn. That's how I like to kind of teach things. So, you know, when I was looking, you know, my first two thoughts were lesson 1 on Jesus' example for me. I've never really felt like I could give anybody advice or do anything if I didn't try to lead by example. If I wasn't willing to throw myself out there and do it myself, what kind of person am I to try to say, do as I say, not as I do? You know, how would I teach my kids? How would I be the father? How would I be the husband that I need to be if I'm trying to give orders and try to hold you to a standard that I can't even try to do myself? You know, what does that say about me if I do that? So to see all of the things that, the example that Christ did for us, you know, sometimes it's easy to step back and say, you know, Christ was perfect. He was the Son of God. He came, and I know he was perfect, and it's just like this unreasonable standard, like I can't relate to him. But he was in the flesh. You know, in John 1, you know, he was flesh. The Word was flesh. So he did suffer the things that we did. He was all human and all deity at the same time. You know, he felt pain. He felt tempted. You know, Hebrews tells us he was lower than the angels, which means he had to feel what we felt. You know, he had to go through some of these things. So for him to lead the life that he did to perfection gives me the example. And that's why I don't necessarily look to Doug or to Preston or to Jake for my example. I do have people that I look to, but he's not my ultimate example of who I'm trying to strive to be. So I really liked lesson 1, and of course I like the last one on humility. The two that are, you know, the kind of the bookends that kinda, it speaks to me more than anything. Of course, the one in the middle about friendship, I think I was the leader of that discussion on friendship and true friendship. I really enjoyed that one too, because it helped me to narrow down who's really in my corner. You know, in today's society of social media and all that kind of stuff, you know, we have friends on Facebook and friends on Instagram and all. They're not friends, not my friends. You know, people I've gone to high school with and people that I want people to see my page because I'm in business. I want you to see what I'm about to throw out there. I don't really care or not, just come buy something from me. That's not a friend. I mean, that's just a social, economic business decision, right? So to say I have 500 friends is not true. To say how many friends I have, and then it's a much smaller number. How many true friends I have, very small number. You know, and I'm not discounting anybody in this room or in this church building. I'm just saying that when it comes down to a friend and a true friend, that gets real small for me. It helps me, Chris Ford, to define who exactly I can count on, who I can talk to, who do I need when I need you, right? Who's there when I need you? You know, the most important thing we talked about in the friendship is my time. My time is what I can give you. I'm not sure what else I can give you. I'll give you what I can, but I can give you me. I can give you my ear, and I would hope to get that back. So those are kind of the three that I was, without getting very specific, Doug?
You gave me an insight into the book, and I didn't really, until we finished it, I didn't realize what was done. But it's 13 different gospel preachers, all of whom either I knew personally or known. Most of them are deceased now. But it looks like they went through each one of these and picked out one of these characters of Jesus each one of these men was known for. And so that kind of, I'm going to be teaching it with Logan this next quarter, but I just thought it was pretty fascinating because H.E. Phillips was known as a man of prayer. Steve Wallace not only was loving then, but he's loving now. He's supporting preachers, for example, in India and in some of the poorest places. All of these were outstanding gospel preachers from a different generation primarily, but they had a strong sense of following Jesus in these specific areas, and I think that's something for all of us to do.
We had a class on prayer not too long ago, and it's interesting that you said that because when I look through and the things that I would really like to know if I'm doing it the right way. You know, am I having a conversation, and is it my belief that he's really hearing me and he can really make it happen? And does anybody ever struggle or have questions or doubts about if your prayers are really being heard or if you're praying in the right way? And do we have the confidence to know that that's true?
I think we can all have the confidence, but I think we can also still have wonder at times. And I'm not gonna say doubt, just
Something that helps me is Luke 18, where you have a prayer that's acceptable to God. The Pharisee who tells God how good he is and preaches to God isn't accepted, and you have a man who's on his knees beating on his chest saying, God, forgive me a sinner. And that was acceptable to God, as opposed to the one who was bragging. So if all else fails, get on your knees and confess your weaknesses to God, and he's going to hear you. So I think for all of us that prayer is something we have to continue working on and growing. And I don't think anybody reaches a point where they can say, well, my prayer life's just wonderful. It can be, sometimes you go through things that throw you and you really need.
Yeah. Does anybody ever find yourself being a little bit cynical in your prayer life? Everybody know what I mean? No. You ever thought about if there's something that you really want, if you're really praying for a loved one, or you're praying for yourself to get better or something, it's like, you know what? What's the use in praying? God's gonna do whatever he's gonna do anyway. It's gonna happen. He's gonna do whatever. Has anybody ever felt that way? Just wondering. You have?
I think the law set up the story, I said, like about Sarah, where, God had made his covenant with Abraham, promised him a son. But Sarah, she's getting older and older, and that, desire to have us as a child is so strong. But the years are passing, and at least from what limited I am as a human to be able to see what God is doing, I said I didn't see anything happening. So what do? I try to take matters into my own hand. I bring us at Hagar into the situation. It ends up as it being a complete catastrophe. But God, still, I said, honors that promise. And when Isaac is born, the reason like she names him Isaac, I said it means laughter. Saying anyone who will listen, I said, will laugh with me. But even though I've doubted, I've tried to put things into, I said, place so that what I would happen, and it didn't work out. But when God, I said, intervened, and at his own time, I said, things worked out. And all of his promises, I said, like, came true. It's just that prayer, I said, sometimes I said the things we want, I said, it takes a long time. And we as humans are limited by what we can see and what we can understand. It takes us at a lot of faith to wait and to see how things play out as time goes by.
It's a really good point about how, we just don't have the big picture in mind when we're asking for things. But Numbers 14 always helps me when I find myself thinking that way. God's mind can be changed, at least in a way that he can work his will into any path. And I just, when Moses seemingly changed his mind to not wipe out the people like he wanted to, he still worked that into it was still part of his will. So we should pray with the desire and the expectation that, obviously in wanting his will to be done in whatever circumstance, but why are we praying if we don't want something to occur? I don't think he can do it.
I think it's always, for me personally, and I'll just speak from my own experience, and anybody else can elaborate. I found myself, the older I get, the more I work on trying to ask for the right thing in the right way, in the right spirit. Preston got on to me on vacation. I've said this story before, and I think either he brought the question up or Amy did, and we were all sitting around eating ice cream out in the sun, enjoying a day, and somebody said, "What's been the best part of your trip?" And everybody was going around talking, and I said something, and Preston goes, "Well, that was reflective." I'm like, well, I guess it was. But the older I get, I guess the more I do get that way, because I'm more thankful for what I have. And I think back on the journey that's gotten us here. It feels like, a lot of y'all may not understand it, it just feels like the other day that Doug was on the stage marrying me and Amy. And now I got a 21 and 22-year-old. That was just last week. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But you look back and I see the gray hairs, I see a little bit overweight, and I see a young man right here, and I was like, golly, man, it's crazy. The time's moving really fast here. What's going on?
I would say as far as like praying and understanding, because things happen all the time we don't understand. And one thing that's always helped me is like in the story of Habakkuk. When Habakkuk actually is granted, I think, this privilege to ask God a set of questions, he asked him first, he said, well, God, I said, the nation has become so sinful, all these people are in sin, why have you not done anything about it? God responds, and then he asks him, but why would you raise up the Babylonians, a people that's been more sinful than us? I said, to judge us. And then I said, right at the end of the book, he says like, in Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 17, though the fig tree should not blossom and there be no fruit on the vines, though the yield of the olive should fall and the fields produce no food, though the flock should be cut off from the fold and there be no cattle in the stalls. Now what he's talking about is everywhere I look, I see no hope. I don't see things getting better, and it feels hopeless. I see no reason to hold on. I said, to that faith. But why should I believe anymore? And then in verse 18, yet I will exult in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. So even though I said I have nothing that I can see and understand, I haven't said that faith. For the Lord God, I said, is my strength. And he makes my feet like a hind's feet, makes me walk on my high places. Now, walking on my high places, I said, is symbolic of talking about like overcoming your obstacles. You overcome, I said, obstacles, I said, through faith. That's why it says in the New Testament, by faith we stand. I said, I don't really have, I said, proof and evidence and something I can point to you that tells you, I said, why I have this faith. But I believe, I said, in God. I believe in who he is. I believe in his character. And when I am exhausted and have no strength, I draw it from the Lord. And even I said, Jeremiah wrote in Lamentations after the Babylonians had come in, destroyed everything. I remember I said comparing it to kind of like I said the Blitz I said in London in World War II, the psychological damage it does about seeing a city completely destroyed that has been there, I said, for hundreds of years. I mean, for us, it's like when September 11th happened, and I'm sure most of us had never been in the World Trade Center, but just seeing something like that happen, the psychological toll it took. And yet Jeremiah is talking about, great is the Lord's faithfulness. Morning by morning, I said, new mercy, I said, I see. And truly, I said, extraordinary.
Yeah, great comment. I mean, you mentioned September 11th, and you find little pieces of history that make sense to you. And to me, you mentioned September 11th. I've got some completed paperwork from Edward Jones, which means nothing to anybody. It didn't really mean anything to me. But it was printed on the 108th floor of the West Tower. And I've kept it because of that, because somebody that produced that may not even be here. So for me, that gives me sometimes perspective. When I'm feeling a little sorry for myself or something like that, I'll just kind of run across that, and I keep it in my office. I know exactly where it is. But that makes sense to me. And that just tells me that there's always somebody else. I mean, I think about, turning on the news, and, I get very, like anybody else, it saddens me to know what's going on in other parts of in the world. And then you've got, Doug and a very close relationship with those Romanian brethren over there. And the refugees, I think around 40,000 are moving over into Romania. They can't take care of them. I mean, so, it just gets worse. We think we got it hard and we got it bad. You just kind of have to put it in perspective and say, that's an unprecedented what they're going through, and that kind of regime and that kind of thing. So, and if you look at, and you talk about, one of the questions in lesson 5 was, how does Jesus help us today since he's no longer here on earth? Does he really help us? And how does he do that? And try to be as specific as you can. And is there a verse or is there a story that draws that out for you? And if you want to share it, that'd be great. If you don't, I would encourage you to find one. Find the verses and find the stories that make sense to you, that gives you encouragement, because there's a lot of them in here. I can tell you and pull out the ones that work for me, that gives me some comfort. And everybody's going through something. And, and at the end of the day, you kind of put it in the Lord's hands, and it's up to him. He's the great physician. So, Jake.
Well, the thing about it is, if Jesus did no other thing for me the rest of my life, he's already done enough. I mean, one of my favorite lessons to prepare for was the lesson 4, it's Jesus, the sinless one. And when you think about that, I keep coming across different examples weekly almost that bring me back to this lesson. Last week, I learned that the moon is 1/400th the size of the sun, and the moon is also 1/400th the distance away from the earth. So just complete perfection there. And if it was any different, we wouldn't exist. If Jesus talked about his perfection, if it was any different, our spiritual life wouldn't exist. And so that lesson was really interesting, comparing the perfection of God's creation to Jesus' perfection. And the fact that he was able to do that, like I said, I mean, that's all we need.
You know, the perfection of his blood that was shed that took the place, you know, from the Passover and the realization that comes forward with what he was able to do for us, because he was sinless, he was able to give it. You know, so the fact that he could feel and go through some of those struggles, if there's a common belief, and I do believe that he could feel and experience everything that I'm feeling today, what makes the world think that I would get a free pass? He didn't. I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense when you come down to it. You see a lot of tragedy and a lot of things that happen to people, and everybody goes, well, why me, and why did this, and why did this happen to me? Well, why not happen to you? I mean, the Christian doesn't give you a get out of pain-free suffering card. I'd like for it to. It'd be great. You know, but this was not the reward. The physical was not the reward.
We get mad when that stuff happens to us, and we're not even willingly getting ourselves in those situations. He purposely got himself in these situations. He purposely wanted to be uncomfortable, to be in dangerous situations potentially. We shy away from it. He went towards it.
So does anybody have a favorite? I don't know if favorite's an appropriate word for you. Does anybody have a lesson that they really, really liked? And there's some good ones in here. There's some better than the others for me, in the way it was written in some of the questions. It is interesting that you had 13 different men and then 2 other editors and another person that wrote the questions. And I thought that was kind of fascinating in and of itself, that because some of the guys that are asking the question go, well, how did he jump from here to here? And so, but you answer the questions and trust the method. So does anybody have any particular lesson that they liked, or any particular example in any lesson that they would like to discuss in the application part of what would make you better? Is that a fair question? What in the class over the past quarter, if anything, in this book and in these lessons, is a piece that could make us a better person or a better Christian? There is no wrong answer, by the way. I mean, it's your answer. You know, if it's a biblical answer, if it comes from the Bible, it's an appropriate application, then it all makes us better. And you know, some of the questions I wasn't really following it, but I kind of went back and just kind of dwelt on it and kind of looked at the question. You know, it talks about the stereotypical qualities of someone who looks unlikely to be a Christian to me, whether they were rich, whether they were poor, just, you know, all the traits. You know, teaching from day one about sales is you never prejudge anybody's disposition. Never. No matter what they look like. I had this beehive-haired lady. You know what a beehive is? Big hair, man. And she came in, and I was tired. I was like, oh, man, I'm ready to go home, man. This lady didn't do anything. Before she left, she pulled out a checkbook with no cover on it, just the checks, and threw it down. She goes, hey, I'm gonna write you a check for $200,000. I know there's money in that account for that. I just kind of looked at my staff and go, Pretty good. And come to find out, she owns the biggest fabric store in Bartlett. I didn't know that. I do now. You know, I was like, wow, I never would have thought that. And another one of Preston's good friends, our landlord, she handles their money. And she lives in like a 1,200 square foot home. Preston's been there. She's got a little bug out front, a little beetle, all beat up, looking whatever. We rented a house from her when we first moved here 22 years ago. April Fool's Day, 2000. And I was like, golly, this lady, $1,000 a month, fully furnished. Like, this crap, she's got to be losing money. And come to find out, this lady says, yeah, I managed that woman's account. I go, she has an account? She goes, yeah, I've got at least $3 million. $3 million. And this lady, we're talking about the same lady. Yeah. Okay. I mean, so you don't know who's standing right in front of you. And you don't prejudge anybody. Just another reminder. And I know that's a physical, superficial thing, but from a Christian standpoint, nobody should be off limits. You know? And so a lot of it just may be our example in how we handle ourselves and how we talk to people. Doug, I did find it. It's right there. My article about Daniel. Doug gave it to me when I went to UT Knoxville. Fall of 89 or 90. It's old. But I got it. I mean, there's some things that, you know, you just remember. You take with you, you let it drive you. And, you know, some things you let it affect you and carry you hopefully to a better place. So anybody got a lesson that they want to share? Any kind of example? Everybody's just dying to talk.
I'll share this story.
All right.
This, not really a bit of alpha. This is something that happened between me and one of my students. I had finally, they had finally taken their reading test so I could pinpoint what their current reading level is. I weighed again what's on grade level versus where they actually are. And I had this one student come in. She, you can tell just by looking at this child that she has, I said, some problems. Some, I said, emotional, some mental, I said, problems. So when she, I said, came up to me and I pulled up her reading level, I wasn't expecting, I said, it to even, I said, be on grade level. I thought it'd be lower, I said, than that. Well, I pull it up. Now, this is the child who's in the 3rd grade. She's reading on 6th grade reading level. That's the highest reading level of anyone in our entire school. We have over 900 students. So I see your point about somebody, you know, you're not expecting surprising you, making you kind of want to sit up straighter and think a little bit more before you open your mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Lesson 11 is one that I will remember and keep with me. Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. So much information in here, a lot of verses, a lot of application. But and here's a hard reality for me, is that question number 4 is why can't all religions unite in agreement that they all serve the one Father and the one Creator? You know, why can't we just all, as society would say, just love each other and get along? What difference does it make?
A massive part of that Creator's plan was to send His Son and the sacrifice. That's all part of the story. And so you can't claim to all believe in the same God if you don't believe in His Son.
Background of him is he came out of he was a denominational preacher and was converted.
Say that again.
He was a denominational preacher and was converted by going to the Word and studying. And, you know, Mitch Stevens and Dixon, that's his grandson.
Do you happen to know what
What's that?
what denomination? Do you know?
I think he was Methodist. Robert Jackson, that was known all over this area of Nashville, came out of the Baptist Church, I believe it was. But so were most of the Restoration preachers. They had, Presbyterian, Campbell, just studied the Bible. And that place of unity is always found in what God has revealed.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think that, you know, the fact of our common, we can't agree that baptism puts me into his body. And that's a deal breaker for me. We have to be united. He suffered and died too cruel of a death not to be united in the one thing that he told us to do as an act of servitude. You know, John 14, you know, it sounds simple, but he said, if you love me, you keep my commandments. You know, and that's, you know, what more, you know, a lot of us are committed to our partners some longer than the other. You know, what shows your commitment to another person? You know, what have you done? What have you done this week, whether it's your spouse or anybody, that shows that you love that person? You know, so, you know, lay it out there. You know, what are you doing? You know, that shows that you care for somebody else besides yourself. I mean, you gotta be honest about it. You know, who are we? You know, what are you doing? And, you know, myself included. So, you know, if I love him, then I'll do what he wants me to do in the best way that I can. And at the end of the day, I have a righteous judge who will judge on that day. That's how I see it. And I don't walk around condemning all my friends. I was never taught to boo the opponent. It's kind of how I see it. I've always rooted for our team. I know Memphis and Tennessee don't like each other, but I never boo Memphis. I mean, I just root for my team. What good does it do to boo the other person? That doesn't do anything, right? I only boo LSU, but I ain't boo it. I had to, man. You're like a shirt. No, I wouldn't boo LSU. I just don't boo. I don't know if Preston, I mean, I put him on the spot. Has he ever heard me boo anybody? I just don't. I don't put down anybody else. I want to elevate who I am and what I'm trying to do. It's not a negative connotation to think that we don't agree the same way. Remember, in friendship, do I love you by saying nothing, or do I love you by saying something? The problem is how I say it. That's the issue. And that's what I can get better at, we all can get better at. But it has to be said. It has to be said. You can't just tolerate nothing. You can't just say you do nothing. Can you? The church won't survive if you say nothing. Anybody got anything?
You did a pretty good job.
I also really like the lesson on the Son of Man was something that was a title Jesus I wasn't too familiar with, and the meaning behind it, and the fact it had so many layers to the meaning was really cool to go through, and you know, especially to see the kind of the obvious meaning of it being, you know, him relating to his humanity, but also the prophecy of it being called in Daniel was just refreshing to go through, because, you know, we mentioned it in the class that he's called that more than any other name, and for me not to have as much, you know, knowledge on the context of it, it was good to go through that lesson.
Anybody else got any thoughts? Anybody had a chance to look it over? You ever thought about why you work? Why does anybody ever go to work? What are you working for? You ever thought about it?
Weekend.
Why are you going to work every Can you name 4 things of what you're working for? Give me one. Why do you go to work?
Family.
The what?
Providing for the family.
Yep, absolutely. What else?
Place to stay.
Place to stay.
Cure the flu.
Cure the flu. I'm gonna let your paycheck handle that one.
I guess like what?
On my paycheck.
But self-dependent on yourself. do you think?
Okay, could be, yeah. Not to take a handout.
Yeah. Something like that. Help out others.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do we find that?
Everywhere. You go to downtown Memphis and see that.
Ephesians 4 would be a good place to read sometime when you're talking about a man that labors. It's good to work with your hands, work for your food. We don't need the handout, you know, and specifically it was, I was looking for 4:28. We talk about the idea of stealing. Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need. So it's multiple layers. We provide for our families, we put roofs over our heads. Everything I do is for my family. And then if all of that's satisfied, I try to give back and give to people that have need if I can. And that's a, you know, the older I get, the more that makes sense to me, to try to help someone that may be less fortunate, who's doing all they can. Not the person that's just sitting back waiting for a handout. And let's be honest. I want to help that person. I do want to help that person. That person also has to help themselves. I can't care more for your life than you care for your own. I want to help you care for your life, and I want to help you any way I can on top of that. There is an individual responsibility. And I think that's a Christian principle that we have to take advantage of our own life, and take responsibility, and own that, and go with it. Anybody else?
I came into the lessons a little bit later, but one I did enjoy was Jesus, a Man of Prayer. I mean, relatively new to all this, and taught me a great deal of things and how to pray and why you're praying and who and how. And so that was a good one for me.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. That's and let me ask you a question, and this is for the class, and if you want to answer this, fine. What obligation does prayer put upon us? It's a question in your book. Actually, to be honest, it was the one I was going to go to, so I'm glad you brought that up, because this will be the last one we talk about. What obligation does prayer put upon us?
To connect more, I guess.
Yeah. What else?
Really creative. Show our reliance on God. Not on ourselves.
Yeah.
Better do what you pray.
That too. Do we believe what we're praying for? You know, because we can't do it, or we wouldn't need the prayer. I would have already done it, right? Thank y'all for the class, and Doug will have it next time. So if y'all didn't learn anything, come back to Doug. He's gonna do it again.
I'm gonna just try to carry it.